Hello, my name is Noah,
And my name is Gavin.
and we're the Blanchard brothers, but we're also man hunters.
Manhunters.
I don't know how great the sync was because we're over Zoom. We are
Yep.
zooming because we're about to vroom vroom. This is episode 14, back after a long hiatus, just like the man himself. Episode 14, here to talk about
Ferrari.
Ferrari. I was like, can I maintain the manhunter's voice, but also bring in the because it's just about maybe the most fun movie title of 2023 to say. You can
I
just
think
make a meal out of it.
we should totally drop in the bit where it's like we're here to talk about more than you can afford, pal. Ferrari. Smoke them.
uh, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a minute.
Hmm.
If you are not familiar, this is a sub series, a mini series, an ongoing limited series, part of the Arc of E network. But this ran originally on the movie arc feed.
Yep.
I don't know if I've dropped any of these old episodes over here on the new kind of main feed home of the network, but yeah, this is Manhunters. This is where we we took a pretty awesome 13-week journey through the filmography of Mr. Michael Mann, who at that point it was kind of like I think we knew some things were in the hopper, but
Right.
we did, we kind of went out on Black Hat being like, hey, we really dug this. It feels like people are coming back around on it in the same way that Miami Vice was kind of reclaimed a few years later. So it was still kind of like, it was an okay note to go out on. But I think we knew maybe that Tokyo Vice
I feel like we did. I feel like
or
we knew
was
we knew that was coming
around
down the
there.
pipe at some point.
And we had discussed covering it and making that episode 14. But ultimately, he did the pilot and we enjoyed that show. But it also didn't feel like there was like a ton of meat on the bone to to discuss just his part, the
Right.
fact that this is supposed to be centered around him. So we kind of held back on that. But then just all of a sudden, a flurry of activity here in the last 2 years. Uh,
Hmm.
he drops Heat 2,
Yep.
the novel. Uh, which is maybe like kind of a soft sell for the movie, which seems to now be happening. And kind of in tandem with that, it was announced the long gestating passion project of Ferrari was finally coming to fruition.
No.
Something that he'd been working on for like well over a decade,
At
if
least
not
20
more.
years.
Yes. I think so much that like the
He wanted
script.
this to follow Last of the Mohicans.
Wow. Okay. So as far back as that,
Yeah.
which would have been so curious. I've heard the various incarnations and castings, but most of those were more modern. Obviously Christian Bale was attached at one point, Hugh Jackman as well. But I
Hmm.
wonder who it would have been if he got it off the ground like way back then. Uh, curious who he was thinking about. I don't know if he's talked about that in any of the press. Speaking of which, I know you said we delayed this a bit, so that people would have time to see it, and also uh, you said you wanted to do a little research, but
Hmm.
I'm curious if you have any interesting tidbits. I didn't go. I've gone. I would say a more than a toe dip, but there's been a lot of press. They've been hitting it hard.
Hmm.
A lot of stuff with him and Adam Driver, and the full cast. A lot of panels and stuff. Behind the scenes featurettes, etc. So I've been trying to work my way through those. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I guess from the get go, on the whole, before we get into plot time, etc., uh, what'd you think? What'd you think of Ferrari? We did not see this together. We saw it separately. I saw it maybe like a week before you, and I think you knew my. I did text you my feelings, so I'm
Yeah.
curious. We haven't fully talked about it. We're coming off of our year end top tens, where notably it didn't crack any of either of ours. but we kind of ended that episode by saying, but like, stay tuned because now
Hmm.
we're in Manhunters mode.
Right.
And as far as uh, Noah and Gav, the Manhunters hosts are
Right.
concerned, this is like this is easily the best movie of 2023.
Exactly.
And he should win Best Director and Adam Driver Best Actor, Penelope Cruz, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's where our headspace is. But we haven't really talked. I think we were both pretty jazzed on it. But like, yeah, what what was your theater experience like?
Just me, Bex, and one other guy. Um, but again, it was Sumter,
Wow,
so it makes sense.
What time, and when was this around the
12,
holidays?
12:30, um, the Sunday
After New Year's or
of
before
New
New
Year's
Year's?
Day. New Year's Eve, yeah, Sunday, New
New
Year's
Year's
Eve.
Eve. New Year's
Yeah, yeah,
Eve.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Last Sunday.
works.
So understandable. Because I was thinking about that or the Iron Claw, and ultimately, timing. I was just like, you know what? I know the Iron Claw story. Like I think I told you. Um, you've listened to Behind the Bastards, but they did a whole deep dive on Vince McMahon, and they used the Iron Claw story to be like, Vince is worse than this guy. And I was like, oh, okay. I know everything I need to know now. And obviously, I knew, of Ferrari, the status of what it means to own one, kind of the vague history of like, you know, what he was to racing motorsports and all that, what the brand is, all that kind of stuff, what it meant for like Ford to come out of nowhere later on after the events of this movie and kind of challenge them at Le Mans and all that. So like, you know, I didn't really know like what story I was getting. So it was nice to see something that like felt very Michael Mannish. As like I'm just getting a little glimpse into a window of this dude's life. There's a bunch of stuff that's happened before. There's a bunch of stuff that's going to happen after that. But I'm just getting this because I really think, and just thinking about it, the only one we really get that is like a to the grave biopic is Public Enemies, and there is no From the Cradle to the Grave. We meet Dillinger like on the last leg of his like life, so to speak. Ali, we get a snapshot of like this time in his life where he probably the most active, but like there's still other things that happened to him after that and before that. So I
Not
liked
not to interject, but I think the biggest comp and the one that I rewatch for this is The Insider
that too. Yeah, I could
because
see
it's a
that.
very controlled period of
Right.
time.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, continue. Sorry.
No, no, no. I was just saying that's and to your point, I forget that The Insider is technically like you throw that in there as like a biopic or like a true life, story
True
kind of thing.
story. Yeah.
True story. And it was just it's one of those where like I read a review and it was like, oh, Driver delivers like somewhat of an emotionless performance. And I'm like, no, but
I was just
also
like,
I could
were
I
you?
c- were you watching the same like what did you
Yeah.
want? Like what did you want from him? But at the same time, like wasn't that Enzo Ferrari? Like you're dealing with a man who's like
I,
not whether he wants to show it or not is basically looking at the prospect of like everything I've done in my life, I could wind up losing it all due to bankruptcy. And do I want to go down this road of like trying to find somebody to come in, but then I have to be beholden to them, or can I keep this on my own? And how do I manage that on my business front, as well as these other things in my personal life that like, I've just been, you know, I've been putting one thing on the other and one thing on the other, trying to balance them both, hoping that like these things all work out. And now push comes to shove, and you know, he is a person singularly. Yes, you can argue that that character is responsible for his success just in how he manages things that happen to him and his company. But I think the interesting point is like if you want to get technical, at least within this little story we see, um, Patrick Dempsey saves the day, so to speak. In what he's able to do with winning the race and all. And so but yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, it's, I'm glad the man has made another movie. I hope we get a lot more. I get that if this took 20 years, I don't know how much longer we're going to have to wait for another film, but, you know, I, it's everything. It's everything, but it's also not because there was. I don't really feel like this is looks or feels like any other one of these biopics or even a Michael Mann movie. It doesn't. There's not a lot of that like, oh, this is a this kind of shot or that. I hadn't really looked at much of like the production. I don't know like I feel
I
like
was,
for, at least for
I
with
hard disagree on that, but we can get into that.
oh no,
Okay.
I'm not that it's not like I mean I don't I in so much as like I can't compare it to another one. Like
Well, okay, before I mean, I would love to discuss the
yeah,
filmmaking, etc.,
yeah.
but for anybody who happens to be listening to this, who may or may not have seen the movie
Oh
or
yeah.
just wants a refresher, maybe take us through like what period of time this focuses on and give us a little plot time for
Oh.
Ferrari. Excuse me, Ferrari.
The year is 1957. Signor Ferrari, the Commandante, he's up against the ropes. His company may be in bankruptcy, his life may be falling into shambles, and he has to do everything he can to save his company and emerge victorious. And the only thing he can do it is by having his driving team win the Mia Magila, whatever. I don't even know how you pronounce that race, but yeah, it's
The Mille
1957.
Miglia, I believe.
Mia Miglia, Mia
Migla,
Miglia,
Migla, Mille
Miglia.
Migla.
The
Yes.
race from the city to city, the people standing to watch. It's very dangerous. They stop it
Very
running 5 minutes.
dangerous.
Yeah, they stop it
Uh,
running at 5 years later, or actually, it's
okay.
like 8 years
Can you
later.
can you can you speak like a normal person and slow down just a little bit
Okay,
for everybody?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Well,
No,
yeah, so
like
it's
can you
19.
you don't have
It's
to like slow down that
1957.
much.
Okay, it's 1957,
What
and
do you
you do.
do
So,
when
you
you
slow down.
Okay.
So it's 1957. Ferrari essentially is on the edge of bankruptcy after kind of coming onto the scene hot in the auto racing world, and he is just facing one personal and professional quagmire, uh, uh,
Right? Crisis, whatever
crisis,
we want to call it. Yeah.
landmine field to navigate, whatever you want to call it. But he's just facing pretty much on all fronts, personal,
Yes.
professional life. His it's just it's all it could all go away right away, and it's one of those where it's like, well, you're watching it and you think, well, yeah, it could, but like, where's the what's the big deal with that? What's the drama with that? Like, who cares? Why are you telling me this story? And I think that like without really trying to hit you over the head, it does explain to you that it's like, well, this literally could be anybody and anything at any point in time. And I like that. I think that's maybe what man is like to me with this one and then other ones like compared interested in and most. It's like at that moment, like what's the human like humanity of this person? What's going on with that at this specific time? You know?
Hmm.
And it's like if you watch from the outside and you know that like, hey, 57, he was like kind of up against it. And then this big thing happens that makes it even worse. How did he navigate that? What did he do? You know, you're probably thinking like, oh, here's just some like rich dude who's like, having a bad year at his business. And it's like, no, everything was in crisis for him. The human behind all of that, the face you saw on TV, the guy giving you, telling you, you know, we're gonna win. I want drivers that are like committed, yada yada yada, all that. Like that guy, he doesn't go home and swim in his swimming pool full of money like Scrooge McDuck. He goes home and he's still facing it, still up against it on all fronts.
Yeah.
And
So
I think that's where that in therein is where like I think Adam Driver just I don't know. I thought he killed it as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, it's one of those performances that makes me want to go back and watch every other thing he's ever done just to be sure, essentially. But I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is my favorite and best,
Right.
maybe the best he's ever been. Um, and it's a match made in heaven as far as I'm concerned. Like as soon as I heard they were working together, and we can push all that to the end of the cast as far as our speculation for Heat 2, but it seems very obvious that Adam Driver will be involved in some capacity, whether he's
Well, I hope
playing
so.
Neil McCauley or Vincent Hanna. I really don't care. But I think they are a nice pair. He is very clearly in that lineage of De Niro and Pacino types. And
Hmm.
I think to the point where it's like I mean, I really haven't there people have pointed it out, but not even necessarily in a negative way, but it's just like the fact that he's playing like 20 years older. And for me personally, it's like I didn't question it for a second.
Oh no, of
Like,
course not.
um, you know, just mind blowing on that level. I mean, all the dramatic fireworks you would expect, but also the uh the more reserved moments which speak volumes. So we open with some vintage kind of like injecting him into what I'm sure was actual like period racing footage
Hmm.
and kind of see like an early victory from him and then we get a little, a thing that brings us in to where we're at in the current story. And it opens like rather quietly and he's with what we find out to be his mistress. Uh,
Hmm.
so that's Lena Lardy, correct? I want
Right.
to make because it's confusing. Lena Lardy, and then we have his wife, Laura,
Yeah,
correct?
Laura
Laura
Ferrari.
Ferrari. Yes, okay.
Hmm.
Played by the incomparable uh, Penelope Cruz. So he, sneaks out of the mistress's house, heads back over, and we're immediately thrust into uh, the duality of this dude's life and the kind of like central conflict of the personal life, which is she's aware that he has, side pieces, so to speak. They have
Hmm.
um, seemingly, I wouldn't call it an open marriage, but uh, open on his side, so to speak. And she's aware of it, but they have a very simple understanding. They have a system. She's made her peace with it essentially, and uh, but it's like you got to be here before breakfast essentially, and he shows up a little late. She whips out a gun, like it is at an 11
Right.
immediately, and you're just like, oh, okay, so we're doing this, like this is okay, all right. Um, and shortly hereafter, I think, do they mention in the opening kind of scroll or text, do they mention the sun?
I
I
don't think
think we're
so.
just kind of organically brought into that.
Hmm.
I think the setup is basically like it's post-war Italy, like Ferrari's like kind of hangs in the balance, and here we go. So, but you basically find out we're like a year removed from the death of their son, um,
Hmm.
he and Penelope Cruz. And obviously, you see him in the opening, their woman, and subsequently, we will of course find out this is his mistress of a long period of time, and that he does in fact have. Uh, I mean, I don't want to be unkind, but he's a bastard. He you know, and he's a hidden child essentially,
Hmm.
secret kid. And so we've got that. Also, as you mentioned, they are Ferrari's on the verge of bankruptcy. I did you go much into like the history of all this? I thought the whole idea that like he's in this for the racing, like he is a racer, even now as he has retired after seeing like several of his friends die, etc.
Right.
Um, it's like he's very much still in this for that and the commercialization, if you will, of the cars of like actually selling them, like, to the public is not really much of a concern. But now
No.
it is becoming one because the racing side is kind of failing and not sustaining itself in terms of the cost, etc. So we've got that going on. Uh, Meanwhile, there's a new, uh, I this was a real guy, obviously, but and excuse me, is it Deportago?
Yeah. Alfonso de
I,
Portago.
that's the new guy who comes in, correct?
Hmm.
Who's kind
Right.
of catches him at the light when he's on his way home and tries to talk to him and basically is like, you know,
Hey, I'm into.
trying to be on the
Right.
team essentially.
Right.
And he kind of becomes a stand-in, his kind of like little sub narrative, if you will. I feel like for like all the racers of this era, you know.
Hmm.
Um, And again, I should say, you said you knew a little bit. I would say I knew next to nothing about Ferrari as a figure, about this period of Italy, really.
Hmm.
Like, it's just not something I'm familiar with. So I'm going in completely cold. And you know, we I'll save those thoughts. Anyways. So where do you want to go next? We don't have to like go straight through the plot, but
Well, no, it's one of those things, one of the things early on that I think was interesting, and it was the only time that I was kind of like, all right, dude, I get it, was when they had the mass for all the drivers. And he compared them like, if Jesus was alive today, he wouldn't be a carpenter, he'd be an
great
engineer.
great
And you
scene. Not
and you would
only
work
like
with metal, not wood. And I'm like, okay, dude, we get it. Like driving is everything to these dudes. And like he invented, like I don't know if they explained it in the scroll, but like Grand Prix cars and racing like that, it's because of Ferrari. Like they
mhm,
invented that vehicle. You know what I mean?
right.
And so this idea, and because I was thinking about, I was talking about it afterwards with Bex. It's like the idea for this was that like eventually, if you want to break it down, maybe it doesn't have its roots there, but it's basically what it evolves into is like, hey, I make cars and I race cars. Oh, I make cars and I race cars. Well, we all have a lot of money and we all are like significantly well off compared to other people. So let's build these cars as fast as we can. Let's push the limits and the edge to the edge of this technology that was less than 100 years old at this point.
Right.
With inside of 60 years, we're at this 1,000-mile race where people are going at, break 100 miles an hour plus if they can,
Mhm.
with no guardrails and just people just out on the road watching them. Like, okay, you
Right.
know. And so it's all around this idea that, like, I don't know if it's like, you know, I don't, I, again, you could probably think of with many ways. It's like, okay, you so the guys that build them are no longer going to be like racing them, but they're going to get like the young guys with the nerves of steel that do this because they love it. They would die for it, all this different stuff. And it's like,
Right.
I don't know how much feeds that feeds into like the macho mentality of like, look at me, I'm a man, I drive a fast. I don't know what it means. I just know that it's like, it's this weird thing of like, you talk about Ferrari, you talk about this, you talk about that. Like, I think because they got rid of their own dude and decided they wouldn't mind being on our side, I think we forget about like Italy and the war and like their part and all that. And we just kind of sideswipe it. And it's not this thing that we like put in there because you have guys like Ferrari who are like, they're living through that. He talks about like the Nazis were coming to like basically he had to do what he had to do to like survive any
Well,
sort of
and
like occupation by like the fascists and whatnot.
you
And
can also look at like the innovation on you know, that side of things, especially post-war, as like a response to the ma- the majesty of German engineering or whatever, and trying to basically like, no, look at what we're building,
right,
essentially.
exactly.
Like, yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, because the
so
BMW is not competing at all, it seems like, or any real German's not really competing. Well, what are the other ones that's in there? I know
I think there
Fiat
is a
was in
Beamer.
there.
Is there not be a Beamer in there? Am I crazy?
It's I know Fiat, and then what was the other big car company?
Maserati is
Maserati.
there
Yeah.
as the kind of their main rival at that moment.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm not you are way more the car guy, if
I
anyone
don't
is
even
on
know.
this podcast. But
Do we even get anything from Lamborghini? I don't even know if he came along. If he was
I don't I
I don't
don't
even know if that
know.
was a
I don't
thing
know
at
if
this point.
Lambos are mentioned, but um, yeah. To that
Yeah, no,
point,
it
I
doesn't.
think
Lamborghini's not founded until like
the
6 years later.
the
So.
mass that you're talking about
Hmm.
is just an incredible sequence to begin with. So they hear that there's a rival team in town. It's Maserati, right? Essentially,
Right.
they've called
Hmm.
in like big name racer and they're trying to
Hmm.
break Ferrari's current record. And so
Right.
they're all in church at mass and they hear like they can hear the starting gun go off essentially. So they're all like sitting there clocking it themselves. Uh,
Hmm.
and you're cross-cutting between like the mass that you mentioned, which is contextualizing like what he means currently in Italian culture and society, like the level that they're seen at, essentially. And meanwhile, like, you know, it's all these dudes literally sitting in pews, like looking at stopwatches, and the way Michael Mann edits it, you're like, this is incredible. Like, what an
Right.
action sequence. And I was just immediately in it. Um, and so shortly after, uh, they have they got to have their dude, you know, reclaim the record, right?
Right.
And that's our first like holy shit scene, right? Am I
Yeah,
remembering this all
definitely.
correctly?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Uh
you're right.
yeah, so again, dude shows Deportago
Hmm.
Deportajo shows up you know, still trying to get FaceTime with Ferrari and he's just can't be bothered. It's like, nope, we got, you know, I'm dealing with this thing over here. So their racer who we see, he gets woken up like fancy hotel model with him
Hmm.
essentially. And it's like, hey, you know, presumably like probably a little hungover from the night before, we're guessing, most
Hmm.
likely, gets called in to do this thing. You're like, okay, like this seems a little dangerous. But yeah, needless to say, things are going fine until they're not. And when that happened, I had heard in advance, obviously, there'd been some like some talk about the crashes. So I knew obviously we're going to see some crash. Some of them were essentially teased in the trailer. But there'd been some criticism of like the effects, et cetera, et cetera. When this happened, I was literally like jaw on the floor.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean, it
it's
is
just
telegraphed if you think about it, but it's not telegraphed
Oh,
at
absolutely.
all.
But it's imagery that I'm trying to think, and I just like I don't think I've ever seen it. The way it's quite staged like that, and the
Hmm.
way he is ejected from that car, and we get the slight slow-mo of him almost just like floating in space away from it. I was like, whoa, that's a person kind of thing. It was
Hmm.
like extremely jarring, felt realistic, but also like you're showing me something I've never seen before. Like, but it feels like, oh, that's how this would happen. Uh, just immediately jarring. But on top of all of that, again, the spectacle, maybe the thing that like a lot of your mainstream movie going audiences may be coming to this movie for,
Hmm.
immediately comes down to character because everything you need to know about Enzo Ferrari
Hmm.
is communicated right then because the look on his face is like, it's a Tuesday. Like, it is so nonplus that you were like, what? Wait, what? That, like, it's. Is this secretly a Terminator prequel? Like, what the fuck is going on?
Hey, Portaga, you
You're
come
like,
by my office tomorrow.
yeah,
Like
immediately,
it's
and
just
it
all right, dude.
almost played like a comedic beat. If you wanted to read this as a dark
Yeah.
comedy, that he immediately goes over and it's like, oh yeah, the guy who's been hounding me, like, oh yeah, I guess I do have a spot for you now. Um, but again, and we do, he does verbalize the psychology of it, but it's like when he's talking to his son, at the when he goes to visit the grave, rather, his dead son, uh, and he
I thought it
talks
was
to,
his mother that he was talking to about it. Like if he should blame somebody, he should blame his mom. He's talking to like either Laura or his mother, and he's like, if you want to blame somebody, blame his mother. She's the one that told him he ought to marry that girl. So, he took his eye off the prize, was more
oh no
concerned
no
with
no
her
no,
than
excuse me,
no, sorry, what are you talking about?
I was referencing more the emotional state.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
think he
okay.
says it to his when he's talking to his dead son in the like kind of mausoleum and everything, that he essentially he had to build a wall after seeing his friend. Okay, so there were friends that died in crashes prior, correct?
Right.
And then did he also lose some friends in the war itself? I was
I
confused about
believe
that.
so. His father and brother, they all served in World War One, but they died in the 30s from
From Autoag. Okay, never mind.
flu. He
Gotcha.
raced for a little bit with Fiat and then started his own thing and then racing team and all that. Then started a production line of cars and all that. But yeah, I don't know if it's like a best friend because I don't know who there is that
The
shot of like somebody leaving on a ship for war, and it's like, well, that's not his brother. Or maybe another brother, but his older brother, that's his dad had his dad's same name as dad. Like he died like after World War One, before World War Two.
Yes, and it was
You
an
know?
illness.
Right.
That's right. So, but he talks about like after that, essentially having to like build a wall and like cut himself off from all that. So
Right.
you see that in practice, but like I said, again, that gives you so much character shit, and it's
Hmm.
like it's a set piece and it's spectacle, but it. I mean, it to me again, that's man all like just all in one little sequence right there, just like
Hmm.
perfectly wrapped up in a bow. And there's so many moments like that throughout this movie. So that kind of that gets now Dave Portago, he's the the new guy coming in. Um, we have him meeting with like I guess whatever is like financial consultants or
Yeah.
the the guys who essentially are like you're hemorrhaging money, you got to sell more cars, uh, and it would help in terms of PR if you won the Mille Miglia that's coming up. So we have that set up. They're going to build a team. Meanwhile, uh, we've got kind of the parallel of like we see him with his new son,
Hmm.
uh, with Lena, and so excuse me, the new son is Pietro, is that or Piero?
Yes, he is the one that's still alive that they met with to talk about everything. He's the current president of Ferrari.
And the so what was the name of the son who had passed away?
Dino.
Dino, thank you, Dino. Oh, and also the name of his brother, which we mentioned. Okay,
Right.
so uh,
Sorry. Alfredo Ferrari, Alfredino. So Dino for short, but
Alfredino,
yeah.
that's right.
But
Okay,
Alfredo is his
so
same name as his brother. You're right.
right, and so we get a little bit more of the kind of or home away from home dynamic he has with the Lena Lardy character played by Shailene Woodley. I will just say, just just an overall note, one of the only things that for me personally holds this movie from being bad, like maybe a stone cold like masterpiece, is the Shailene Woodley performance, which I think is gets there emotionally when it needs to, but is maybe not as dialed in as uh as her acting partner. I guess is
Yeah,
the
I
way
could
I
see
would put
that.
it. But again, I feel like she still hits the core of what she needs to, which is essentially like, what are we doing here? Like, are you gonna like claim this kid, make him a part of your life? Like, you know, it's not so much a concern for my feelings, but what's he gonna think? Like he's getting older. He's about to get his what confirmation?
Right.
Yeah, and it's a matter of like what name he'll take on, etc. Uh, Meanwhile, we should mention his wife, Laura Penelope Cruz. Again, she's aware that he has affairs. What she's
Right.
not aware of is that he's had a long-standing, ongoing, essentially second family, uh,
Hmm.
or that this kid exists.
Right.
So we should also mention she's like very involved in the day-to-day business. She helped him build the business. You know, she's a mover and shaker. She's makes decisions, etc. And so in the course of her kind of looking through moving some money around, looking at where they're at, etc., she goes to the bank, she finds these payments that have been made and
Hmm.
eventually finds this estate.
Oh,
Uh
dude, like
dude, when
when that
she
bank dude told her, I was like, "Oh, bro, you're fired, bro."
you're
Like
so
I was
done
thinking about
for.
some dude. There's been so many times where like somebody's said something. I've
It's
heard a
probably
teller
most
say
relatable
something.
scene in the movie for you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
well,
didn't
yeah,
think
but
about
like
that.
I've heard a teller say something. I'm like, "Oh no, you weren't supposed to fucking say that, dude. Like you
Yeah.
can't say that," because people are like, "I'm sorry, what?" And like, and they're like, Oh, and because I always get on people because one of the biggest things they talk about is like you don't talk to other members when you know that their spouse or significant other or someone they know has been in here. If someone asks you, say, "Oh no, I haven't seen them," and you don't volunteer, "Oh yeah, they came in here earlier." Like that's a big thing that I
Right.
get pissed off about because they make a point that it's technically you can get in trouble for that. So when
Uh-huh.
he's like, "Oh yeah, well it's there's these payments of this and that," I was like, "Oh shit, this guy just fucked him over." Didn't even know that he did it. Wasn't even thinking
He's
about
like,
it.
whoops,
Didn't think like, well,
whoops.
maybe the commendatore doesn't want his wife to know where this money's going.
Yeah.
But indeed, he's just
And then
like,
that eventually leads to uh one of the more like emotionally devastating silent scenes I've seen in a while, which
mm-hmm,
is just her rolling up to the estate and kind of processing in real time all on her face. And on top of all that, you're like, okay, she gets that, like, there's clearly a woman here or whatever. But then when she sees that car that
mm-hmm,
is clearly her son's toy and has
mm-hmm,
now been given to the
mm-hmm.
other son, and that's like how she finds out about it. And the fact that it's a toy car, I'm just like, dude, sometimes just like just do all the shit. Do all the simplest stuff. Like just put it all in there because sometimes I just want that shit, dude. I was just like, oh my God, dude. That
Yeah.
oh and Penelope Cruz, who I love in pretty much everything I've ever seen her in, but is somebody who is has always been stronger in her native tongue.
Mm-hmm.
This is the best English language performance I think I've
Oh
ever
yeah,
seen
hands
her
down, dude.
give. Just so dialed in. She
My
was
favorite thing was
she
like
was
literally
incredible.
the next scene. That car is back at their house with Laura.
Oh
I love it.
yeah,
Becky picked up on it. She goes, "Did you see the car?" And I was like, "What?" She said she took the car and brought it back to the house. I was like, I saw her take the
and
car.
he's
I
and
didn't
he's
realize that
almost yeah he's
he's
almost
oblivious to it.
oblivious to
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
I just, yeah. And so, yeah. And this, yeah, there's a scene later between his mother and her that I was just like, oh my God, dude. Like, that's just talk about, mm, like, it's one of those things that and it's if you don't know what it is, it's that they could not you could not divorce in Italy. It was not a thing. It was not
Hmm.
happening at that point in time. So
Right.
it that does kind of if you're coming to this as like someone who's like, oh wow, like she just knew. It's like, yeah, she knew. And yeah, she didn't know all of it, but she knew. But it's one of those things where it's like I almost kind of look at her as like she's like a partner at this point. She is half a Ferrari. And we find
Right.
that out like moving forward that like she's a big half of it, you know? But it's one of those where like because that's the culture and that's the whole thing, there is this like, you know, okay, well, I can't really get a divorce. And that there's a whole other side of that with like, forced marriages and like if somebody like,
Well, and prior
all
to this, we
this,
have the whole element of like she is half of the company,
yeah.
and he needs her to basically sign everything over to him
So he can
so
make a
that he
deal if
can
he
have
has to.
negotiating power because
Mhm.
he's considering going to the table with possibly Ford, something he's not actually considering, but then that's a whole other element, the way he plays the press.
Oh,
Like we
dude,
haven't
I
even
love the way,
talked
dude,
about
that's
like
so
all of
fucking
that
good.
stuff. We'll get into that. But so we've already set up that like she's got some cards to play essentially.
Hmm.
Um and I believe their initial agreement, because I think this is before she knows, right?
Right,
Her
before she
initial
knows, because she's
agreement
going to
is I
handle
want
all that.
right. That's
I
when
want
she
to
goes
check for
into the
500
bank.
million. Yeah, I want to
Exactly.
check for
But
500 million and
she's
I'll sign everything over to you.
and he's like, you cannot cash this like until we've made a deal, essentially. If you do, you could bankrupt us. So we have that hanging back here
Right.
in the back of our brain.
She does theoretically have him by the balls. Yeah.
Yes. Uh so I guess I mean, do we want to go ahead and get into like the scene between the two of them? Or
Oh, yeah.
should we
We can.
save that? I forget when it occurs in relation to like it's before the race, isn't it?
Uh,
Or is it
yeah,
after? Is it in the aftermath of the race? I can't remember.
it's the aftermath of the race.
Okay.
The scene I'm
So,
talking about with his mom happens
yes.
before the
Okay.
race.
Remind me that because I'm a little,
Well, because
I'm
they're
trying to
going
remember
back and
that
forth,
sequence.
and it's I don't know if she's told him because I can't remember if he finds out that she knows about him, about his other son before or after the race. But
I feel like it's
she said,
before. It's definitely
right.
before.
And at that point, she makes the comment of like, what does he need another son for? Like, I already gave him a son for this and that. And his mom says, well, it turns out he needed more than one. Or like, it turns out,
Hmm.
well, he just needed this one too, or whatever. And it's just one of those where it's like, wow, dude, like no matter what, like your in-laws can just cut you down and it doesn't matter. And just
Dude.
like
Yeah.
just
And
this
this,
whole like,
this is a
the
mom.
hierarchy is like that's your husband's mom being like,
This,
yeah, well, you didn't you gave him one, but if to imply that like, well, if it wasn't your and his kid, maybe he would have been strong enough to get over this illness that he had,
right.
to the effect like
And
that's the
again,
cold burn behind it,
this is a mother who says of her her own child, her own living child, that the wrong kid died, like
Exactly.
openly to people.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, that's like a triple double, squared
Yeah.
burn. I don't know.
Yeah.
That Yeah, she's a tough cookie. Mama Ferrari. I'm
Yeah.
not sure of her name. We're calling her Mama Ferrari.
I love when he comes in. It's after
She
the.
is so short compared to Adam Driver. It is very funny.
It's
She
perfect.
is like a Miyazaki character
When
compared
she
to him.
when she comes in, I think it's after the crash, and she's like, "All right, my bags is packed. They're gonna leave." He's like, "We're not going
Oh
anywhere."
yeah,
Okay, and she
she's
just leaves. Oh, all right, we're not going anywhere. We're not
so
having to
again,
run for the hills because they
that's
want your blood. Okay.
that's something I want to bring up because this movie gets to some pretty dark places. It's pretty heavy emotionally. But I gotta say this. Shout out to the late Troy Kennedy Martin, who wrote this screenplay. Okay. The movie's been or like this project been around for so long. He passed away in 2009 at
Oh,
age
jeez.
77. So his last couple credits, uh, his last movie that got made was Edge of Darkness with Mel Gibson. I don't know if you remember it was a
You,
British movie they brought over here.
you shoot
Uh,
my daughter.
he did Italian
You shoot
Job.
my daughter.
He did the Italian Job remake.
Okay.
Or excuse me, he did the original Italian Job.
Oh God. Okay.
And so he gets credit on, yeah, yeah, yeah. What else? Oh, he did Edge of Darkness, the TV miniseries. Never mind. Uh, yeah, a lot of TV. Kelly's Heroes back in the day,
Whoa.
right after the Italian Job. So yeah, shout out to him. But I think I think it's a fantastic just script. Like maybe my favorite script he's had since The Insider, I would say, just from a sheer writing standpoint. Like I love the jargon of Miami Vice and
Hmm.
Black Hat. um and that whole vibe and mode, but just from a like pure writing set, like of like every scene has like a fucking great button on it. There are some like zingers of lines, like a lot of stuff to chew on. uh I just thought the screenplay was incredible, particularly some of the monologues that we'll get into. But yeah, so but yeah, it has those moments of like dark comedy or levity or whatever, however you want to look at it, even in the midst of all of this very, very heavy drama. The movie is very operatic without like, I mean, it draws a pretty fine point out. We have a whole like centerpiece sequence kind of set around opera. And it is very much like these characters, these real life people are living out these levels of emotion and like
Right.
betrayal, just like, the depth of sadness of like losing a child, the tragedy of losing a brother, like all of these like big grand emotions, that's so much a part of that culture too. It's like, I don't know, there's almost an aspect of like, are these are they somehow living out these like larger than life? Is that inherently an Italian thing to like, you know, to always have some turmoil in your life,
Right. That's like you just
almost.
constantly have to have
Yeah.
it. It's like I don't know, maybe it's some weird romanticism thing from like just the old country, as they say. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So, uh back over to the racing side. Again, the side that I feel like I'm so curious to talk to. Like I feel like you even being like a car guy, like
Hmm.
broadly speaking, a fan on that level. You were going into this though, like also as a huge Michael Mann fan. I guess my question or concern, and I haven't been able to talk to him yet because he hasn't seen it, but like my boss at work, he's like, he's a gearhead type guy. And
Hmm.
like, is he gonna like this? I guess is my biggest question. Like the people who are going to this for strictly the racing side of things, when they get all of this familial drama, um, it, are they gonna go for it? Because again, I was arguably like as, if not way more invested in the stuff happening off of the track than the stuff happening on the track. And now I think is maybe a good point to get before we get into those big monologues and everything. You said something earlier about it not necessarily feeling like any prior man movie. And I would agree with you to a certain extent, which is I was surprised how, for lack of a better word, more classical it felt
Right.
from the get go.
Hmm.
Um, like when we're once we're into the movie itself, like he opens with he's trying to put him in that period, and like again, it's intercutting with like actual footage. But once we're into the story proper, I was like, oh, okay. Because I wasn't really, you can't quite tell from the trailer, honestly. I was like, is he going more like high res DV, like the
Right.
full on version of that? What's he going to do with it? And he's not. It's far more traditional.
Hmm.
Almost like, so then I'm like, okay, I kind of have to almost reframe. I'm like, when was the last time he was in this mode? And I'm like, I mean, I guess really it's Heat because like
Which came after Last of the
Which
Mohicans,
came after
which is what he
Mohicans, which is
wanted.
definitely more in that mode.
Right, but this is what he wanted to do after Last of the
Well,
Mohicans,
and
so
that's
it perfectly fits that he would just go
right.
back and do that
But
because that's yeah.
here's the thing, though. I'm immediately going like, okay, but like, kind of came to see my boy cook. Like, I want some of the last era, essentially,
Hmm.
and we do get it, but it is isolated to the racing sequences,
Right.
and when once we're in those, he I think he's way more in the like wild, like you are there
Oh,
documentary
just from the
verite
audio
style.
alone,
Like, oh, dude, I mean,
if it doesn't win for best sound, I mean,
I was
just
gonna say
the
I had been giving so many props to the killer, and I still think that it has impeccable sound design. But like this and again, I didn't get to see that movie in a theater. This in the theater, best like sound experience of the
oh
year.
yeah.
Like I say that more so than Oppenheimer, like legit, because it's not just the engines and the cars sound crazy. It's like there's a lot of other shit going on. I'm just saying.
Right.
So, um, I got a little lost in the sauce there. What were we talking about?
About how it's just not like his, but also
Oh,
kind
okay.
it still is
So,
and
but
innately
I was
is.
saying, I think it's the best fusion of those two things because some
Right.
people like Public Enemies didn't work for them because it's like, oh, this is really jarring doing period in this style,
Hmm.
essentially. But I thought here, implementing it where it's like in the racing sequences is when we transition into that. Made them almost like more powerful, more engaging, and it's almost again, we haven't really talked much, we haven't gotten too much into the duality metaphor, the thematic thread of this whole movie, but the two siding of everything, the two objects, if you will. Um, but to me, I kept seeing it as a further echo of that, where it's like it has these two almost very distinct filmmaking styles, as if the racing itself exists in this other space. Like it's communicating maybe not even the romanticism of it, but which is one way that you could shoot this. And he talks about that a little bit in some of the behind the scenes stuff where he was like, I didn't want to be super objective. I didn't want to have a ton of like, here are these gorgeous landscapes like at a distance and these cars like,
Winding through it. Yeah.
winding through it at high speeds, but like with a remove. It's like I wanted you to be subjective, like right in there with him. And in a theater, it's I mean, some of the most visceral racing sequences I think I've seen, honestly, outside of something like like a Death Proof where they're like they're doing this shit. And
Hmm.
the fact that this is like they're in period cars or replicas in some cases,
Hmm.
and you know, you have Dempsey, for instance, we haven't like really mentioned yet, but as kind of like the go-to guy on the racing team, and who in real life is like one of these dudes who's
Oh yeah, he's got his
also
own
like
racing
a
team. He
huge racer and everything, and is very
had they
like,
had originals, he
yeah,
probably I think he's got licensure to be able to drive originals if they had them to use because he would have been the only one that they would have insured and trusted to do it.
yeah. So that feeling of just like knowing going in, it's like I know he did his homework. I know this is going to be presented
Right.
as realistically as possible. And then to get into these sequences where I was like, they're, they're really doing this. And like, really, like that sense of speed that I feel like is so hard to communicate
Right.
on screen in a way that doesn't feel effects heavy. And they're just, I don't know, dude, the way they capture, especially like the tree lines and the way like things kind of warp like at high, it's just incredible filmmaking. Like it, I think for a person like me who's not like I'm not a huge car guy. I'm not a huge like racing fan in general. It kind of makes you get it. It really gives you the visceral thrill. It kind of like lets you scrape the surface of a little bit of like, oh, I kind of get why people might be into this a little bit.
You
And
can you
then
see
it
this?
also pull it back a little bit. Oh yeah, 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 the kiss of death. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Like
I
the
mean, we'll
fact that that's
yeah.
there, that just proves it's like, no, they're really, yeah. He's done his homework. We know exactly where they are, what they're doing. And it's one of those where like I didn't know until I researched it that this has taken 20 plus years. But knowing that after the fact, after watching it, I'm like, I'm taking everything that I was told, everything that happened in that,
Hmm.
what if any was embellished, but like knowing that they met with the man, that they met with the guy that's essentially he's being portrayed by a little boy, but like they met that guy, they met Enzo's,
Yeah.
flesh and blood, and they talked to him about everything, about they, went over thousands of documents to try and figure out what exactly happened with that crash. It's like, yeah. So when I see that crash on screen, I know that the lead actor who isn't in that scene. I know that the director, who's been trying to do this for 20 years, and I know that the son of the man that we're watching a movie about, they've all sat down and talked about it.
Hmm.
And so that's as close as you're ever going to get to what actually happened, short of somebody recording it on a film reel and just happened to catch it in 1957, which we know that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But it's one of these things where like, maybe we haven't talked about it, but it's like, that guy, Fortago, he was already like an aristocrat. He already had like, he was already a big deal. None of these guys are like bums. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so
They're
I
like
just,
overnight celebrities, essentially,
yeah.
regardless. Like even if
Mhm.
they came from nothing, it's like they are the
Yeah.
rock stars, if you will, of that era. Um, so we've kind of got his parallel narrative built up. You got Sarah Gadon, who I'm I'm rewatching True Detective season 3 right now. She's in
Just
that as
started.
the interviewer. I forgot. Yeah. So that's getting built up. I feel like really the main things we need to hit. So they have the qualifying run. Uh and things don't go like great for them essentially. Uh do they lose somebody in that as well? Or no, there's
No,
just
no one,
somebody
no.
else wrecks in that. I just remember like them driving through flames and smoke and stuff. But that's the one where they don't perform as well as they want them to. And it leads to him kind of having to sit down with the team afterwards,
Hmm.
where, I mean, I would never be able to do it anywhere near the justice he does, but it's the best. I mean, it's the whole movie like coming together all in one right there. Um, but it's essentially like I I need you got like if you're gonna race for me, you gotta be willing to die, essentially, is what he
Right.
builds up to saying. It's like uh and he gets into the concept of like two objects not being able to occupy the same space and time. Like eventually, one's gotta pull ahead. And he's like, and the reason that you lost today was because the other guys they said fuck it and went anyways. It's basically like that's what I need you guys to be willing to do. No hesitation, no
Hmm.
nothing. Like that's,
Yeah, because didn't he take him off? Like he was like when he came in, he was like, "All right, you're out. Like get out." And he's
yeah.
like, "What?" And he was like, "We're gonna let him drive." And it's like I could have taken him. It was like if you were gonna
Yeah,
take him,
why
you
are
would
why are
have.
you holding back
Well,
essentially?
you're holding back.
Yeah.
Just do it. You know.
Hmm.
You know. And it's one of those things that like I don't. One of the things that I feel like at least in that sequence is shown is a lot of people probably don't think about it because they don't there's not a tradition. There are several courses here if you were just a casual racing fan, there are several courses here that like the top of racing in in America in the States that they do have roads, but like most of it is how can you manage making a giant left turn or several turns to the left for so many laps. Whereas this a lot of like at this point in time, it's since kind of dropped down. I don't know how long Le Mans track is. I know you're just doing it a whole 24 hours, but like
Hmm.
this one especially is like it's 1,000 miles from here to here, and you're just gonna go, you know. And his whole thing here is get out in front, stay out in front, you know.
Hmm.
And it's just a kind of a testament to like what I was trying to get at was like the differences is that like there are lines and angles that like you think you can, but if you don't, you're gonna be you're dead. Like
Hmm.
if you're not like the scene where he has to take because he's holding back. Either he's gonna go, he's gonna find that line, cut in, and the other driver's gonna back off because it's like if I hit this dude, we're both fucked.
Right.
Or the other driver's gonna say, fuck it, that's my line, and you are both dead. And
Hmm.
that's what you're dealing with. You know, again, we're less than 100 years removed from the invention of this technology that's propelled men to fight two different world wars at this point.
Yeah.
And now we've reached the pinnacle. And the only thing we can think to do with this is like, well, let's just make them as fast as we can and let's see who can get there the quickest. You
What
know,
is
who can engineer the fastest, like,
what does he
death
call it?
machine.
Um, my deadly passion, my
Yeah,
terrible joy. Yeah.
right.
So good. And it is one, I mean, it is genuinely for the people like me in the audience who are like, I mean, yeah, it's cool to drive fast, but like, I mean, not that fast, man. I don't know. I don't know if I get the appeal. It it is kind of the moment where you're like, all right, yeah, and that's what that ultimately is what separates like me from a person like Enzo Ferrari. It's just like I
Hmm.
that would never be me, dude. And I will maybe
Hmm.
never be able to fully understand uh that kind of like devil may care, almost death wish mentality level of thrill seeking. It's something that I think I engage with a lot in terms of like whether it be last year I talked about 100-foot wave, like with the big wave surfers and stuff. Like I
Hmm.
do like watching stuff like that because I'm fascinated by the mentality that allows people to do that and take part in things that are like, you know, where they can convey it's like here's what I get out of it. Here's like the high, if you will, the like euphoric feeling that I'm able to achieve at different points in this. And it's like, okay, but the whole like literally risking life and limb side of that, that's not okay for me. Just like,
Right.
I feel like
Well,
there's
and
got to be a safer way to find euphoria. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I
and
don't
it's
know.
but it's this interesting thing
I'll,
because like
I'll never get it.
you
That's why I'm fascinated by it. Continue.
exactly, but you got to think like, all right, what if this is 3 years earlier, right? And it's the race. It's the same race. It doesn't have the same stakes, but it's the race.
Hmm.
And he's got his son, 23, 24 years old. Company's all right. It is what it is. Um, is he giving those guys this speech? Is he always that? Or is this a man that in this particular snapshot in 1957, his company could be in ruins. His wife has found out he's had an affair and he has another child. Um, and there's all these other things going on. And so he's got nothing to lose. And he's like, guys,
He
you
he's
gonna drive and die?
he's
Or
willing
you
to
gonna not
say,
drive for
"Fuck
me?
it, we both
Fuck
die."
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's, I think it's like, we don't know, we never will know if like that's the same mentality he had before this specific point in time where all this is coming down on him. And
Right.
this race is important. But it's one of those where like for a guy like him, I mean, he gave up driving for he he wanted to be around for his son Dino. Like he quit and focused on making cars. And
Hmm.
so and by all accounts, like, when Dino came around and he got old, because he was like 23, 24 when he died. He wasn't young. I think in my mind, before I read that, I'm thinking like, oh, well, he was like the same age as this little boy. It's like, no, no, he had lived a full, like, they had time with him, both of them.
Hmm.
He was in his 20s. So it makes sense. But like, you know, you, you, you just have to wonder like where he would have been had the circumstances we've seen that brought him here. Is that what like pushes him to be that guy? Or is
Hmm.
that just him, regardless, like any situation he goes into? Because he's as adept at like giving those speeches and getting that from his drivers as he is of like, okay, guys, all right, you're gonna write a story. You're gonna tell everybody that I'm thinking about partnering with Ford, okay? But you're gonna hold it till this certain time, wait, and then you can publish it. Okay. Okay, cool. You know, and then it's one of those where, like, when we get to the back half of the story, which we can in a minute, we see that, well, was this always him? Or was like, did he have help learning how to be this way from Laura? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because before we get to that point, we obviously have to talk about, you know, the biggest thing, like of the worst thing of all of the shitty things that happened this year in his life. This is by far the worst. And
Yeah.
it's the crash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get, I mean, an incredible like racing sequence, top to bottom, that you kind of know from the get-go. I mean, again, it's telegraphed because we know movies and he's not necessarily shying away from it. I think because he also knows there's a certain amount of people who are going into this, probably a good bit of the big racing fans who probably know what's coming.
Right.
I had no idea other than I know how movies work. And
Right.
the way they were setting up the character of Deportago was like, he is a marked man. Like,
Right.
literally, he's not going to make it. I don't know how. I don't know why. I don't know what exactly is going to transpire, but that character's not going to meet a good end. What I did not know is that he was going to kill multiple women and children and what was it, 8 or 9 people? How many?
Um, Not 10 spectators, five were children, and
Oh
then there were 20 more
Jesus!
injured.
It
Yeah, as
is.
soon as, dude, no, not even that, dude. As soon as the whole family is
Oh, so,
sitting down eating
oh,
dinner, I'm like,
absolutely.
oh, dude, this is not good.
The
And I
way
had
he,
again, I had no
yeah.
idea about this either, as
Oh,
much as
okay,
I know. I had
gotcha.
no idea going into it. But it was one of those where, like, because it was just me and her in the theater, we both kind of looked at each other like,
Oh shit!
what?
And the
Because
way
it's one
he
of those things
plays
where
with
it's
that,
like,
because you're like, dude, the kid, grab your kid, and they do initially, like in that early montage when they want to run
yeah,
out and look and everything,
hmm
and you're like, oh, okay, I think we're good.
yeah. It's like in this case, it would have been better to let the kid run in the road. He probably would have missed the car, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Um, but yeah, just basically,
And so so we when you talk just so we're on the record, you talked about like, the kiss of death from and whatnot. We have that there. Um I don't the one thing I thought was interesting that Becky was pointing out to me, she's like, okay, that guy stopped and didn't show his papers like twice. And I was like, oh, maybe he's gonna get to the end and be like, well, you lost because you don't have your papers stamped at each thing. I was like, that'll be interesting. And so when the baby starts running out to watch everything, I'm like, oh no, this is not well, this isn't gonna end well. And I looked at her and she looked at me like, why are you looking at me? Not like um we both had the understanding that like something bad was happening. She looked at me as like, what? Am I supposed to know what's going on? And because my whole thing is like, I don't know I know there were five children. I don't think we see any children, the aftermath or any carnage with the children. We're just told that. I don't think we need to see any of that, but it's one of those where like when you
I
bring that
think
element of
this,
it, it's
I think the
just
staging of it is both
enough to make you
hair,
understand.
like absolutely harrowing,
Yeah.
uh, upsetting, jaw dropping, all of that stuff, and doesn't feel the fact that it doesn't feel gratuitous, and it just feels
Right.
like genuinely like heart stopping. Um, I just want to, I mean, I completely unforgettable sequence, like one of those just like, oh, wow. And then on top of the aftermath of it though, when he comes out and has to kind of take a walk through the wreckage at night,
Hmm.
and they're trying to confirm whether it was the fact that he didn't want to blow up, he didn't want to hit the tires, he thought he didn't
Yeah,
have
he didn't
enough
want to change.
time.
He didn't want to change him out.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
it.
excuse me. I mean, we could have had a moment of levity. We've kind of already moved into it, but the moment when dude from Maserati like spins out, and then uh
One of the guys,
one of the
like, it's
Ferrari
just,
drivers like picks him up. I think it's Dempsey, isn't it?
I
It's either
think so.
Dempsey or it might be Jack O'Connell. I'm not
I
sure.
think it was Jack
But
O'Connell because
yeah, yeah.
Dempsey was out further.
So yeah,
And
they bring him up, and just the Maserati guy just being so ashamed.
yeah,
Like,
I'd rather you walked
you
here.
should have walked. You should have walked. I was just like, oh
Yeah.
God. Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyways, absolutely like terrible, devastating crash. It's like, um, and Dempsey like is past all of this at that point, right? So it's like
Yeah.
he wins, but he doesn't know. I think he has the like initial like I won, but he very quickly I think is informed, and they, oh my God, they have the moment where like uh Enzo comes to him and like is basically like, you shouldn't let you shouldn't let this overshadow your victory. Like, you
Right.
did a great job still. And again, a great wordless performance from Patrick Dempsey there of just
Yep.
like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what? What the
Yeah.
fuck? Yeah. Um,
I don't know if you read, but like he dyed his hair that color to get the look and it all fell out.
mhm.
It was like, poor guy.
That was one of my favorite tidbits from the
Yeah.
trivia. Yeah. Uh, yeah. So he kind of has to walk through the wreckage, and it's just, I mean, it's again, it's just, the movie is so thematically rich, but it's like it's literally the guy who just told a room full of people, you got to be willing to die for me, you got to be willing to die for it, uh for this thing that we love. Again, deadly passion, uh terrible joy. But when he's confronted with it taking something outside what he sees as the realm of like what we do, like we're racers, we all go into this with a certain, like we essentially make a contract with death, like from the get-go, like we know the stakes, we're well aware.
Yeah. For those about to die, we salute you. Gladiators.
100%.
Yeah.
But the people who appreciate it from, maybe not as a terrible joke, maybe not as safe a distance as they should, but the people who still are tantalized by this passion or whatever.
The
But
hell is wrong
e
with you, Noah?
even as this
Jesus.
may be the most fucked up thing I've ever said on this podcast. For
No,
the people who were like
no, I get what you're saying.
tantalized
I just had to.
by this from a distance, being like directly affected by it, that's I think something he's presumably never had to deal with directly prior to that. I'm sure, I mean, a witness to, I'm sure, any number of terrible crashes. The Mille Miglia, as I look, the brief little bit of research I did, but like the death toll was already around like what, like 32 people
Right.
at this point
They
in
s-
history of this
and
being run. And
they
they
stopped
still
running it
tried
a
to,
couple years later.
yeah, they still tried to do it a couple more times with quote unquote more safety concerns in place. But just, um, yeah, just,
Well, just the fact that it's like you're watching them and it's like, no, those aren't other car racers. That's other vehicles on the road at this point. You know, these guys aren't trying to like get in front of them. That's a dude on his way to work,
right.
that early in the morning. And it's like, that is badass that you have the nerves to steal and the wherewithal and the way to drive and handle all that. But at the same time, what is the fucking point if it's on an open road? Like, put it on a closed course. Do
Yes.
it somewhere where, like, if and again, I'm sure they looked at this and many other wrecks and many other races to be like, we should probably put a barrier between the fans, just as, you know,
I
if
remember
they,
I see the only thing I had really had seen akin to it, I feel like rally car racing was really big when we were younger, like early 2000s.
oh yeah, yeah.
And I would see a lot of that where it was like, they're in these big open, like open fields and dirt tracks and stuff. And you have these turns sometimes where people are just piled up to watch like one maneuver, one drift.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, like, again, 10 to 15 people are dead or like severely injured because it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, dude took a turn too
Backing
wild.
kicks out. Yep.
When they go through the city in this, like the actual cityscape, and it's so windy, I was like, that was so nerve wracking. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that got me keyed into, I was like, oh, I was like, is something going to happen with the crowd? But I still just, I, I didn't put it all together until it was all just like right there in my face, and that sequence was something else, man.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot. Uh, so yeah, he's in the wake of it, confronted with this, and then I mean I can't remember when it happens relative, but like I think they have their big blowout fight before the race, right? Because it's post race when she comes to him and they have the whole finances conversation, if you will. I believe it's
Yeah, I
two
think they have
separate
the blow up about
sequences.
things and she's
So
done. But then
the
the second
right,
one is like, oh, hey,
that's what it
she
is. Because
on top of
okay,
all this,
they have
she
the
cashed the
excuse me,
check.
yes, exactly. They have the kind of centerpiece fight, which is like just an acting masterclass between both of them, where it's essentially she's become aware of the love child, the affair, everything, and it's just like I can't even like you just try and put yourself in those shoes. It's like you lost your kid a year ago. Me and like the oh man, I'm sorry. It's so rough, but I'm just like the whole element of you let him die. You promised me he wouldn't die, all of this. And the reason that he died is because you didn't try hard enough. You took your eye off the ball because you were checked out because you basically had like this life raft over here. You had this other like healthy kid, another wife to escape to, all of this. Um, it's just devastating, dude. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she and so it seems like there's no them getting past this. This might be like the end of things, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we have that, you know, is it half a mil or is it 50,000? How much is it? It's
Five hundred
500,000. Yeah,
thousand.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, hanging out there. So after like literally in the aftermath of the crash that night, it's like she cashed the check. You're like, oh fuck, like, hit him while he's down. Oh shit. They come in and they have what I would also argue is one of the best scenes in this entire movie. Uh, but where she basically reveals it's like, no, what I I actually did the smart thing I told you to be doing this whole time. It's the other element we haven't like fully addressed, but like,
Hmm.
we can leave some things on the table, some things you can enjoy your own time going through. But his whole relationship to the press throughout. And that's a huge element of this. And I kind of thought I was like, oh, I was like, I guess they're kind of, if I had to contextualize it from what I know, it's like, oh, they're kind of like how the British press is kind of today, where it's like, oh, they're like really aggressive, or at least I guess how they were
Vultures.
a couple years ago. Yeah, that whole perspective. And then I'm like, wait a second. The term paparazzi, if I'm not mistaken,
It's an Italian
is
word.
Italian. And I started putting it together. I was like, oh, they invented this shit. They
Right.
invented the like vicious press cycle, like printing complete slander. Also, like we'll print whatever we're paid to say as well, which
Right.
becomes a huge element of this. Um, so, but she's like, I did what I told you to do from the get go, which is basically like I bought off the good press that you need, like
Hmm.
to get you out of this scenario.
Because I want to say that right as that starts, like he gets back and either she does she have the newsreel or something, but he just has that like if Italy wants a scapegoat, well here I am. Like if that's what you want, then you can call me that. Because
Yeah,
like, again, you can't, yes, he's driving a Ferrari. Yes, it's your name, but it wasn't his fault. It was a pure accident. Tires. You know, it's like this is just odd, and I thought about it in my mind. Um, in doing so, like doing research with this, I've been listening to a new podcast called Infamous America. The thing I listened to, John Dillinger. One of the things I kept hearing about that, and granted, this is like 20 years before that. It's like, oh, they tried to get away, but the car broke down. And I'm thinking, well, the car broke down. The reliability of an automobile is a relatively, I'd say, within 20 to 30-year phenomenon. Because in the first 50 years, if you could get it to run great, if you could
mm-hmm,
keep it running awesome, and if you could keep it doing that for, I would say, more than 10 years with the same one, hats off to you. You know,
right,
that as we've evolved, because that's one thing that we may have not touched base on. He didn't want to sell more cars. Those are, from what I understand, at that point in time, and even up through the modern era, they are not mass produced. There's very
right,
little. Like the outcome, I want to say they maybe put out like thir 32,000 cars last year, which is not a lot of cars when you think about what Honda and
relative to
Toyota, bro. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah,
just, but that's therein lies the rub of like, but hey, that make it so much better to have a Ferrari because, you know, you you can they're a thing of beauty, you know? No,
yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm wrong. 1300
1300 last year,
1300 200 sorry, I'm sorry.
13,000.
13,221
Okay, that's
ship
still
units
very
in 2022
that's
and
very
the
low.
company's revenue is 5.9 billion dollars. Okay? So that should tell you do the math and that'll tell you how much you can,
Yeah,
get one for base.
right,
And again, this is a company that still requires people to have specific license to just even come test drive one. And you may not even be able to buy it if they don't want you to. You know what I mean?
right, mm-hmm,
And I'm sure Bugatti and Lamborghini and always are the same way, but this is the first guy to do it. This is the first. And I think that goes back to why this is an important story. And again, you're talking about how like we get back to this final scene and she's like, yeah, dude, I didn't fuck you over like you think.
yeah.
Like I did what
But
should have been done.
what she also does in there, and
But
it's just
here's the catch.
yeah,
We'll do this. We'll weather this storm. We'll keep this thing going. But I can't have you acknowledge your other son while I'm still alive.
well, again, again, it's not a catch. She says this is not an ultimatum.
Right.
Very different from before when
Right.
she wanted the check. what she says is like so much more heartbreaking. She says, "It is my wish that you don't
Right, wish,
acknowledge
right.
him while I'm alive."
Hmm.
Um, and cut to, I believe it's like the next scene, right? It's the next scene is the last scene,
Hmm.
and it's him with his kid, with his son,
Taking him to see his half brother.
right?
Yeah,
And he does acknowledge him, and we are told at the end of the movie, this is the guy who runs Ferrari.
yeah,
Like, yeah, two yeah,
crazy.
two objects cannot occupy the same space,
Same
Gavin.
space. Yeah,
Um,
they can't.
you can't have a mistress and a son that you hide from your wife out of propriety, even though seemingly all of Italy already knows about it. um,
Right.
you can't have those two things coexisting. Um, and yeah, at some point you gotta choose essentially, and that's kind of what he did. She, as far as I know, like remained a part of the company, and was well taken care of, and then eventually Lena, or yeah, Lena Lardy, eventually she did move in. They had, you know, an ongoing relationship, but the movie wraps up, kind of like that. That was that, and that was this period of time, and
Hmm.
I loved it all the more for that. My big takeaway, and I fully acknowledge this, is like I was already in the bag for this movie. I've been very excited for a new Michael Mann film, and I felt like this hit on a lot of stuff that maybe we were more inclined to appreciate after having spent, 13 weeks kind of deep diving into all of his stuff. Maybe in a way that we wouldn't have been if I had, you know, just casually been like, oh yeah, I like him. I check out all of his stuff. He's one of my dudes. But maybe if we hadn't crunched all of those together, I wouldn't have been like, oh, looking for these things actively. So it hit on all of that for me, but I can't deny that this played hugely into it. I saw a lot of biopics and or true, based on a true story films this year.
Hmm.
Some better than others. And
Last year.
it's almost last year, excuse me, 2025. And it's almost become like you know, a genre unto itself, or like the new cliche almost, where it's like we used to constantly say, dude, don't give us these boring, stately, cradle to the grave biopics about these great figures, blah, blah, blah. Like, can't you just like focus on a period of time and like really tell us something about the individual? That's almost become the norm now.
Right.
It's like when you're pitching one of these, there has to be a take of like,
Hmm.
well, here's how I'm going to approach it, or here's going to be the perspective. So here's the big ones that come to mind as we're just kind of like wrapping out things here. Oppenheimer, obviously.
Hmm.
And that's a movie that, again, is part biopic and very perspective driven, but also has a lot on its mind beyond just its lead character. But it wants to use its lead character to look at all of these things.
Oppenheimer, or How I
And
Learned to
I think,
Stop Worrying and
for sure,
Apologize for Creating the
the
Superhero
atomic
Genre.
bomb. Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah, yeah.
okay. That's not where I thought you were
Sorry.
going with that, but okay. Um, and I think that one very successful. Okay.
Yes.
Uh, Priscilla. I don't know if you saw Priscilla. I was a huge
No.
fan. It was on my long list. Sofia Coppola's movie, and it is like very strictly focused on the period of time from when she meets Elvis to when she left Graceland. And like that's kind of it. And even within that, some of it, we do kind of leave out some big chunks, and it's very perspective driven. I thought extremely successful. Got a very great sense of like what it must have been like to be her and be in that scenario in that time and place. Okay. Some less successful efforts that came here towards the end of the year that definitely colored my response to Ferrari. Did you see Ridley Scott's Napoleon?
No.
Okay. It'll be on Apple TV Plus eventually, and I think maybe in its director's cut format, which honestly I will give a shot. But again, arguably my favorite working actor, Joaquin Phoenix, and Ridley Scott, a guy who I'm like, kind of half and half on, but like when he's good, he's good. And I do enjoy Ridley Scott quite a bit.
Sometimes you get Raised by Wolves, Ridley Scott. Sometimes you get Alien Covenant, Ridley Scott, and you never know what you're going to
Sure.
get. I mean, it's just a fact.
For sure. So,
Also, hang on, real quick.
okay, go ahead.
Remind me at the end of this to talk to you about Tony Scott so I don't forget. I have a thing I need to ask you about Tony Scott. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. So, Napoleon, and I'll go ahead and throw it in here. Uh, the other one that really, didn't quite work for me, but maybe a little bit more so than Napoleon, Bradley Cooper's Maestro,
Yeah.
the Leonard Bernstein biopic. Did you see that one?
No, I need to watch it.
Okay. In both cases, I felt like I was watching, well, this is true in both cases, like 2 hour plus uh like lengthy movies about some of the most influential figure, like in the case of Napoleon, in the history of the world. Like in recorded
Right.
history, one of the most famous figures. We literally have a complex named after him. Like
Right.
an enduring figure of history. Many people, there have been many movies, there have been many high profile people who wanted to make movies about him. Okay. Leonard Bernstein, again, beloved figure in like American culture,
The
also just
first great American composer. Yeah.
music at large, etc. Somebody who, like, if you don't know him, you know the name, kind of thing. Okay,
Thank you, REM.
exactly. So, it's one of the worst moments of Maestro, by the way, is when they use the REM song in the movie. That happens. No joke. Okay.
Thanks, Bradley.
It's like he wants us so badly to take him seriously, and then he does shit like that. I'm like, this is why they won't give you the Oscars. Control yourself. Okay. Anyways, in both of these cases, I felt like I spent 2+ hours with these figures, and I knew less about them than when I went in, dude. Like Napoleon takes the approach of like, well, we're not going to give you dates. And I'm like, okay, I'm not like a history buff or anything or whatever, but it's very much just like, all right, you're not really ever going to have a real sense of like where we are in relation to like European history at large or like world history, what this means to French culture. And then like just very practical things like Napoleon. What do I know about him? Me, dumb, like not a history buff, definitely not a history buff. But when you say Napoleon, I'm like, what do I know about him? He's short. All right. Okay. Really good strategist, right? That's kind of his deal. That was kind of the like, he was
Mhm.
short, but motherfucker knew how to plan a battle, right?
Right.
2.5 hours, Gavin. I shit you not. Motherfucker doesn't plan a single battle. There's never a scene where he's like, and you go there, and we'll go there. And I don't know why I'm doing this voice because Joaquin Phoenix doesn't do an accent. He just does his Joaquin Phoenix voice. He just kind of talks like he's in any other like movie where he just uses natural accent. But there's no scene where you get to see him like plan a battle or even where they explain to us like, hey, here's how we want this to go down, or here's how we're going to subvert what they expect us to do. There's none of that. It's just
Hmm.
like, here's a bunch of shit. Here's just a series of events that are happening. Okay. No,
Hmm.
no real sense of him as like a three-dimensional human being or anything. Same kind of complaints with Maestro, where I'm just like, okay, but like, we're spending so much time, quote unquote, like in the bedroom or behind the scenes that I'm like, I have no sense of like who this, like who he is in society and why he is important or like what, you keep telling me he loves music and he's very passionate about it. And there's kind of like one set piece sequence that tries to illuminate that. I do think it's very effective. But in general, it's just like I don't feel like I really like know anything about. And maybe you're trying to be like he's kind of unknowable and is he elliptical or whatever. But it's that like in both cases, I was like, where's the take? Like Napoleon. was gonna, was a passion project for, I know, Kubrick for like years, never got off the ground, ends up doing Barry Lyndon instead. I know Ridley Scott, other directors have been like working towards it. I'm like, what, but why? What, what made you want to tell this story? And like,
Hmm.
people have asked similar questions with Bradley Cooper and Maestro, where it's just like, okay, but like many people have wanted to make a Bernstein biopic. Everybody seemed to think you were the guy to do it, but like, this is your take at the end of the day. What is the take? You know what I mean? And so I go into this and I'm like, oh, I forget. Michael Mann knows how to just make a fucking meat and potatoes good ass movie. First and foremost, an entertaining film. On top of that, he's very concerned with realism, character, research, motivation, all of that, so that it feeds in organically to what you're watching. And it's just little things like this, dude. The scene where he sits with little Piero,
Hmm.
and explains to him how an engine works. I was just like, dude, that's all I'm asking for in a movie like this. I
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
when he comes home. It's like literally
I'm
after telling uh
I'm
Fortaga
like
he got the
I'm
job,
like,
he sits at the dinner table when they do that.
you explain to you explain to me a little, like, again, not a car guy. You make me understand a little bit more about like the beauty of an engine, like how it can be, the whole thing he describes to his son about like usually something that is, I find that things that are more well designed or more functional are more visually pleasing, like, that does tend to be the case. But him just explaining engines in that moment, I was like, that's practical information. It's also showing me like who this guy is. Like, it's not just, oh, I'm a I'm a racer, man. I get off on this because it's speed. It's like he, it's every aspect of it. It's the construction, the beauty of these engines. It's like it's so beautifully distilled in a little moment like that where I'm like, I'm getting again so much like character information right here in like, what might seem like, oh, okay, we're trying to build the father-son relationship or whatever, but I'm like, it's hitting like all of that and more for me. Like, it just, you know,
And
it's
it's
just
beautifully
top-notch filmmaking on
right, but
every
it's
level.
beautifully layered in like so much that like you and I, we know that, we see that, we get that. But like someone like Becky or anybody else who may not know, may not even be into Michael Mann, may not even be into Ferrari, they can watch it and be like, oh, okay, well, he's smart. He knows engines. Obviously, he told his son how they work, so like it's still on like
I'm saying
it works on every level. Like it works for you if you like you hit that groove of like, oh, I see what we're doing here. It's this just the minutia of this tells me everything I need to know. I've already seen this guy turn to this kid who he turned down and say, "Hey, I guess I need you, so come by the office. We'll get you squared away." After this guy's flown out of a vehicle and just, dead, and
no.
it's like, oh, okay, what time is it? Can I get? Are we done here? I gotta get home, you know. And, so yeah, it does feed into everything like that and informs us, those of us who are there for that. We get fed, like you said, meat and potatoes. We're informed. We get these little nuances and it's great. And I
Well,
can
and I
understand where like you don't get that from other filmmakers because I feel like they're trying to do too much with like a broad spectrum of things. You know what I mean?
you know,
Like you could make a
like
movie about Napoleon when he is, banished to the Isle of Elba and just being there,
exactly. There's
you
so
know?
many like things
Right,
within there where I was just like, you could have made an entire movie about Waterloo, like, and
right.
just the build up to that. But it's just
Yeah.
like instead, it just feels like a footnote in like whatever grander. And again, maybe the 4 hour cut of that movie like is a fucking banger. Like, who
Dude,
knows?
and like,
But what I saw was just, I don't know, a
so
slog, dude, a slog. I can't imagine it
did
being an
you
hour and a half longer, but
did you see the Catherine the Great series with Helen Mirren?
no.
It was on HBO. And like before that, I was like, oh, that's the one that everybody says fucked a horse before she died, right? Oh, okay. Then I watched the series because Becky was watching, and I was like, well, there's so much more shit here. And it's only like 6 episodes. And it does kind of have these different chunks of like with her husband. Husband gets got. She takes power. Young lover and Jason Clark. Jason Clark conquers the world for her. Her son's not happy about it. Grandson's born. She kind of treats the grandson like he's the actual son and kicks the son out. And then here's the end of her life. But we hit all these beats. And again, it's a mini series. But at the same time, it's like if you have somebody that big, like a Napoleon, or like even this Leonard Bernstein, you could flesh it out over that, you know?
They're just,
And this could work as like you in the same
I
way as
feel
like
like
if they gave this to Michael Mann to do it for HBO, okay, give me founding the company with your new wife and Dino. Give me going up against Ford as like, season episode 4 or 5, and then give me, the crowning jewel of retiring and letting your new son that you can now
yeah.
say, hey, this is my boy, letting him take over. And that's your little 6, 7 arc episodes, and it's a mini series. You could
Well,
totally
I
do that.
again, I'm glad that we got it as a movie for
Oh
Michael
yeah, no,
Mann
yeah.
and not a miniseries. But yeah, I think overall with the like the current trend of biopics, there's almost this lean towards they want to obscure stuff so much because it's like, oh, well, it seems too obvious to just be like, well, here's this place and time and like the date that this happened or whatever. And like, we'll vaguely hint at things as opposed to like spelling. And sometimes I'm just like, sometimes I kind of want you to spell them out, you know? It's like
Right.
I feel like we've moved so far away from like people don't want to be cliched because there so many of these exist that almost now those are becoming the cliches that you obscure the thing so much that you almost lose sight of like, well, this could be about anyone. But it's like that's not always the story you're trying to tell. A lot of times, yeah, you're trying to take a like a revered figure or somebody big and kind of
And
not
humanize
lay
them a
them
little
low,
bit,
but
yeah.
humanize them and like make them relatable. But it's like that's not always the way to do that, essentially, is like make them so bland that anybody can read themselves into it. I
Hmm.
like a strong, bold characterization. We never really like oh, excuse me. Never mind. I don't know where I was going with that. I was gonna say I think I don't know that we fully brought home the whole like duality angle and the things not being able to coexist. But I feel like that was, you know,
Well, okay, so like we can do that because when he's with Lena, it's very much like a she's there for him, comfort physically, even though he does hook up with Laura. Like they can't keep their hands
yes,
off
they
each other kind of
clearly
thing.
still have,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. There's a thing there,
yes.
And it is that maybe that reminder of like once was for old time's sake, doesn't matter. But like with Lena, it's very like I'll say it. It very much is the way that Laura, you know, contextualizes it to him. Like, you're already off and gone with this other family. You already have
Hmm.
that thing going on. And so you see that, like, maybe, and maybe we haven't touched on it because of Shailene Woodley and all that, but like, for all intents and purposes, Lena is kind of like the light. If we're going to talk true detective, light fight in the dark, I think the light's
Hmm.
winning. Lena kind of is that light of like, if I can just get out of this, mess. I have to use, I have to have Laura help me and all that. But if I can just get out of this and keep my company together, I have that on the other side of things. And so there is a lightness with him. I don't think he raises his voice in argument to her at all. Even
Not
when
with
she's
Lena, no.
right. And
Um,
so I think that's the duality you can check. It's like this is obviously
well,
where
and I
he
was
wants to
also
be, but also
the ultimate.
understands what it means to be there.
Excuse me. This is what I wanted to hit. The ultimate message of the movie that we arrive at with the crash, essentially. That's the duality that I wanted to hit, which is essentially it can't he this passion that he
He
has
can't,
for
yeah.
racing cannot exist without the tragedy that is going to be
Right.
inherent and always a part of his life because again it is his deadly passion, but the idea that like essentially his life, his existence will always be engulfed in some sort of turmoil or tragedy because he has chosen this as his profession and these things should not exist together. Like they should,
Right.
you should not be able to take a piece of metal and make it go this fast. Like this is somehow like against nature. We shouldn't be doing this, but yet you've chosen to make it your life's work. And so on some level, you will always be paying for it. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, I just thought, again, I thought a pretty knockout movie that just left me with a lot to chew on. I think two absolutely dynamite performances at the center of it. Uh, some of the most like visceral, muscular filmmaking of his career. And dude, I mean, yeah, I think the people that are out there that are like, this is like B tier or lesser than, or like, he's so back, baby. He's so fucking back. Go,
Oh yeah.
go make Heat 2 and just like blow all of our minds. Just do it, man. Just do it.
You know what's crazy?
What's that?
The entire time I was like the second half of True Detective season two, I was like, if you just put a mustache on Velcoro, it's Sonny Crockett all over again. Just the way his hair slicked back and he's got like a 5 o'clock shadow. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
dude,
I mean,
that,
I feel like he's talked about it, but like I think True Detective, I forget what the timeline on his like second round of like big sobriety was, but I think he basically has talked about that Velcoro performance is very much him tapping into the space he was in when he was making Miami Vice. Again, the
right.
period of time that he claims he does not remember. Uh, yeah.
Well,
So
we remember it and it's
we
amazing.
remember it very fondly, and we encourage you to go back and check out all the earlier episodes of Manhunters.
Yes.
And we also encourage Michael Mann, if you're listening, there, please, there, he better not be. This would be so embarrassing. But um, we do encourage you to make Heat 2 though, or another film, please. That would be cool, so that we can make an episode 15 of Manhunters. But very glad we got to come back and do this one. Uh, you know, Carpenter, if he ever hops behind the chair again, uh, resurrect that series. And
Definitely.
in the meantime, since we stopped doing him, Mr. Robert Rodriguez has basically made like an entire other filmography's worth
Right.
of
Yeah. We could just go. Yeah.
movies.
We could have a whole like other season of
Literally, we
just
were
that.
like, all right, Machete kills. He's going to take a pause or excuse me, it was all lead up to Alita.
Alita, but
And then
yeah.
it was like, all right, clearly, like, this is going to be a new, like, chapter in his career. And he has subsequently made, I want to say, like, 6 or 7 movies since
Yeah.
then, something like that.
Come on, man.
So,
We gave this man a pandemic, a
I was going to say,
downtime to
maybe
be at
we,
his ranch or studio just making stuff. Of course, we're going to be six ready to go the minute we got back up and running.
I was gonna say maybe we just wait until Rodriguez basically has made enough movies for us to double the episode count of our
Right.
original series, and then we just do
Right.
Rodriguez Revisited again, just
Yeah.
of the second half of his career.
Right. Rodriguez
Uh,
revisited. There
yes.
you go.
You wanted me to bring up Tony Scott before we
Just
wrapped out.
real quick, I just have you when's the last time you went back and watched Beverly Hills Cop 2?
Yeah, I'm gonna reveal something to you here on Mike.
Okay, I figured you didn't. You want to know what's
I
crazy?
no, I'm gonna reveal like I'm gonna say this out loud.
Okay.
Probably gonna get crucified for it. Uh, I've never seen any of them.
Okay, you're missing out.
No, I know
Um,
I am.
mhm.
And it literally, like, they're all on Paramount Plus, and I'm always like, dude, I gotta do these sometime. And I just
Just
haven't
off
done it
the
yet.
ax
But I know
just
I'm
off
gonna
the
love it.
Axel
I know
Bap
the first two
trailer,
at
dude.
least. Yeah. But no,
Okay, so
especially with that this year, I
no,
feel like that would be a great thing for us
here's the
to
thing though.
cover.
This is the thing. Talking about True Detective season two and nobody cares. It doesn't matter. So Tony Scott directs the second one, right?
Right.
Every fucking time Bridget Nielsen is on screen when they're doing these robberies, the person doing the music has stolen the Escape from New York, the Duke Comes to New York theme, and he's just slowed it down and changed some of the chords and stuff, but it's bum 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 bum.
Okay. I'll have to check this out.
Dude, just watch the first, just tonight, please. Watch the first scene of Beverly Hills Cop 2 and just listen to the music as you're listening to it and tell me that you don't hear the Duke arrives or whatever, that the Isaac Hayes' theme from that,
Okay.
from the Escape from New York. I have like I played it back and forth for two people, like this is the same song, and no one seems to care. And I don't even know at this point if Carpenter knows that he's getting ripped off or not. You know, I don't think he got a check for it, but it is very clearly every time you see the bad guys, they're using different themes from Escape from New York, played differently. Versus,
Okay.
like you get Axel's theme and then you get like
Okay.
this whole other thing. And it blew my mind away that nobody seemed to care about it. I was like, dude, what are we doing here? But it was a Tony Scott film of all the directors in all the world. Like he okayed this. It's like,
Well,
is that a
we
nod that you love Escape from New York?
I don't know.
Like
Is this your way of soft pitching Scott and the Scots? The Brothers Scott
Great Scott.
again? Great Scott. That's what it was called. Great Scots.
Who is the Great Scott? I don't know.
Great
It-
Scots.
yeah, Great Scots. Because I'm going
I
to
don't know.
argue with you right now. Some of the most recent stuff, according to this Napoleon thing you're talking about, kind of feeling like it's Tony, and he's been dead for a while.
We've always said it's Tony.
And of course, it's
We've
Tony.
always said it's Tony. But no, I mean, I guess this is something to kick around. So we are about to embark on an 8 week journey through True Detective season 4. It's known as True Detective Night Country, starring Academy Award winner Jodie Foster and Kaylee Reese as well. She might be a Emmy nominee. I'm not sure, but yeah, we're very excited about it. That's what's coming up. But here's something I wanted to throw out there, something to ponder in the intervening 8 weeks, and maybe if you want to email us at thearkofe@gmail.com or hit us up on our Instagram at the Ark of E Network, uh, let us know because after we finish Trudy, maybe it's time to do another director's series. This was
Yeah,
fun. It was fun resurrecting man, but maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for a new one. We could throw some names in the hat. Um, Again, we've often threatened the brothers Scott or some variation of that where we double up and do you know, one of each, a Ridley and a Tony each episode, just to kind of change up the structure. So it'd almost be like a 2x2 uh, built in. That'd be a fun way to do it.
hmm
We've also thrown out like the Paul W.E.S. Anderson cast, where we have the three guys at play, and we just throw their names in a hat
we should
to see
do.
what happens.
What's the one guy? The weird dude.
You're gonna have
We
to be
should
more
go.
specific.
Uh, we should do like him and what's the other guy with the? Oh yeah, we should do something with like David Lynch and like Michael Bay or something. We should totally do that. Like I think that would be fun. We just pit them both together.
Is that is that
Um,
is that what you want to do?
yeah, I mean we could. I don't know.
We could bring back the Bay of Lynch. We could do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been at least 17 years since we've done it. So I mean, it's the same kind of timeline as like true Twin Peaks of Return. So I feel like it's right on brand
I think we
for
have
our
to.
podcast that nobody asked for.
Thank you for forgot, but it's 25 years that we have to wait before we can come back and do more of that. Uh, okay,
So why am I thinking
but yeah,
17 years?
I don't know. I don't know.
Huh. Okay. 25, 70. No. Yeah,
25
maybe.
years.
That is 25. I'll be seeing you in 20. Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
That come you like
Like
will
it
come back
come
in
back in
style.
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 Don't know why that still bothers me. That little man still bothers me, dude. There's so
As
many
well he
things.
should. As well he
So
should.
many things, dude.
Okay, yeah. If you have any suggestions for
She's
directors
dead.
you would like us to
Wrapped in
cover,
plastic.
um, yeah, let us know.
Yeah,
Let us know. I just went through all of Fincher recently.
we
That's
could do
something.
that.
But, definitely been covered. Maybe we want to go a little more obscure. I don't know. Maybe we get weird with
Sidney
it.
Lumet.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
You do realize Sidney Lumet has, I think, like 80 credits or something. It's something insane. He has like
Sidney
an
Lumet, let's
insane
do
number of
two an
director's
episode.
cuts.
It'll take us 40 weeks, and we'll have the
Whole
whole
year
year
will be
to
taken care of.
ourselves.
Yeah. I don't know. If you have
Lamenting
suggestions.
Lumet because we have to do all these fucking episodes.
Oh, excuse me. The one last one I will suggest, I guess, is the one I'm throwing. It's so weird because we've covered so many of his movies, but like we'd have to find a way to make them fresh and different. Billy Friedkin died.
George's.
No, Billy Friedkin died
Of
last
course,
year,
yeah, yeah,
and
Bill, yeah,
feeling Friedkin. We've mentioned it before.
yeah.
Um, maybe
You know what we should do?
the most
We should,
logical jump after Man, honestly.
yeah. But what we should do is like when we come across ones we've talked about, we just literally sit here. We do like a 30-minute, no, do like an hour-long episode, but it's a loop of us just being like, hey, go check out this episode. Thanks, love you, bye. And then like, hey, go check out this episode on this feed. Thanks, love you, bye. But it's for like an hour.
I mean,
For like Jade or something, you
I
know?
could just like cut the. Did we ever do Jade as an episode proper?
We did Jade in a 2x2.
Is that a lost episode? I think that one didn't. I think that one got removed because of a music cue. I don't know if that's out there.
Probably.
I don't know if that's
Because we
out
did
there.
Jade and it was like the summer of sex or whatever, or like something, didn't
The
we?
Summer of Sexual Seduction. Okay,
Seduction. Yes, dude.
we did Eyes Wide Shut and Wild Things. We did Color of Night.
And Jade.
Was it? I'm
Yeah.
looking it up.
It's
This
Color
doesn't
of Night and
sound right.
Jade. And then there's one other one. Didn't we? Or did we just do two episodes of that? I could have swore we did more.
Hold on.
Color of Night
Two
and Jade.
by
And then
two
Wild
retro
Things.
reviews.
It had to be, dude. It had to be Jade and that because I swear we talked about it.
I'm gonna find it. Hold on.
Yeah.
No, it was Mulholland Drive, my favorite movie of all time, and Color of Night, the worst movie we've ever talked about.
Right.
It was such a whiplash pairing. And then it was Eyes Wide Shut and Wild Things. I think you're right. I think we did record a Jade episode. I cannot remember for the life of me what it was paired with.
Was it 2x2? I just remember because we talked about the. Was it two Freakins back to back then? Did we do Jade? We didn't
We
do
did,
Jade and Sorcerer. I know that we didn't do
no, we
that.
did the Sorcerer Shakedown.
Right.
Shakedown with Peter Weller and Sam Elliott.
Dude, I love Shakedown. I'll ride and die for
That was
Shakedown.
that was a good time.
I just watched RoboCop the other day too.
We definitely have a missing episode that got pulled. I feel
Yeah.
like I don't know if it's Jade though. Can't
It
remember.
had to be, man. Because I remember talking about like the chase sequence in that. And then we were talking about how like at the end of the day, at the ending it, he was just like, yeah, and by the way, if you it just yeah, I did we do it with another one of those like not erotic thrillers, but like it's like Rising Sun or something like that with I don't know. I can't remember, but I swear to God, we talked about Jade for a while. Like I remember sitting down in person and talking about Jade with you.
I, I'm looking, man. I'm looking.
But if not, I mean, it may have been lost. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, we could totally do Freakin'. Um, I think I tried to pitch Frankenheimer as well at one point.
Okay.
Like,
This is literally nobody's listening anymore. But just
yeah.
to recap for you, brother, these are the ones that I see available. We did Surf Ninjas and Broke Down Palace. In the Bedroom and Renaissance Man. Shout out to Tom Wilkinson, who
Rest in peace, Mr.
unfortunately
Wilkinson.
passed away, dude. I mean, and also we did Michael Clayton and Super Mario Brothers. That's another Tom
Yes.
Wilkinson joint.
Yep.
Yeah. We got Sidekicks and Three Ninjas,
Yes.
Kickback. That was a fun one. Sorcerer's Shakedown, as we mentioned, Mulholland Drive and Color of Night. To Live and Die in LA and A Million Ways to Die in the West, maybe my favorite. Just you experiencing To Live and Die in LA for the first
Yeah.
time was
That was so.
incredible. That's another Friedkin, of course. We did our little football pairing of Waterboy and Friday Night Lights, nARK and Looper, uh,
Yeah.
Top Gun and Piranha 3D,
Double T. No,
uh,
just 3D. You're right.
The Great Silence and Crackerjack, The Long Good Friday and The Big Hit. That was a fun episode.
That was my probably my favorite. talking
Blood and
about the
Wine and Scarface. The Blood and Wine segment is whatever, but that's a good Scarface chat.
yeah.
The Pledge and Den of Thieves. That was a good one.
Yes.
Uh, let's see. Night Moves and Excessive Force. Cutter's Way and Wasabi. Batman 89 and Batman Begins. Action Jackson and 21 Bridges. But no, my personal favorite episode, maybe my favorite podcast you and I have ever recorded, Eyes Wide Shut, Wild Things. I genuinely think is one of our best discussions ever
Oh, because I did my research.
because you'd never seen it before.
That too,
Um,
but like I did my research.
but I thought it was a great pairing,
Oh yeah.
great episode. Um,
I might have to
so
go back
we'll
and
we'll
listen to that
leave you
one.
with that. If you, yeah, I guess that's how we'll make this worthwhile. If you're not taking the journey on True Detective, we've just given you a, a lovely lineup of old 2x2 retro reviews you can go check out on this very feed if you are so inclined and you want to do the movie thing while we're doing the TV thing. But we will be back this coming Tuesday with the inaugural episode of TRUEsDays with Noah and Gab, season two, I guess, technically. Because we
Yeah,
only
because
did
I've
one, we covered three week to week, and we did those episodes where we gave our thoughts on one and two. Uh,
yeah. So
but
yeah,
yeah,
this is technically season two.
technically season two,
That
but
works.
covering season four of True Detective Night Country. Okay, until then, I have been Noah,
And I have been Gavin.
and we have been the Blanchard brothers, and we have also been
Manhunters.
See the smells.
Haven't you, my man?